Welcome back, everyone. It's been a hot minute. There's actually a lot coming out on the horizon. We have War of Immortals, Divine Mysteries, all kinds of goodness. Also, Paizo releasing a full-on trailer for their book. Like, what era of tabletop do we exist in where we're getting commercials for new upcoming books, expansion books, I guess is a way you could look at it. It is wild, and there's never been a better time to talk about things Paizo related. And honestly, at this point, I'm not going to do that. Today, I'm going to be talking about an interesting subject I'm sure is going to be very close to a lot of you. And I just needed to kind of mix things up a bit because honestly, all I've been doing recently has been reviewing content. I mean, how many books have released just this year? Also, how many books are releasing next year? Because there's 5 big tabletop games releasing next year beyond just anything new coming out for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. So, I figured to kind of get the creative juices flowing again, to put it in a kind of gross way, we're gonna do a video about little guys. You know the little guys, right? Every group has someone who just loves playing the little guys. They are people who like to play goblins, kobolds, or leshies if you're a Pathfinder player. And I decided to look into this topic because I don't play with little guy characters all that often. I like playing cool badasses, as I'm sure a lot of you are, or at least characters I find narratively interesting. And while little guys can definitely have a story of their own, they're definitely more orientated around being either the group's mascot or just a character who's funny for funny's sake. But there's some misconceptions of what constitutes a little guy when it comes to tabletop, because it's not something that's so defined as playing a little character. Now, to be fair, a lot of people love playing little guys as little characters who are, size small or smaller, but you can play a big character or a medium-sized character or whatever your flavor of little guy. A great example in tabletop of the little guy character is pretty much any character that Sam Riegel plays on Critical Role.
Drinking now.
That is real absinthe, guys. Did you? You said that it was fake.
No.
First playing Scanlan, a promiscuous bard who shat in a jar to scry on one of their companions, and then followed up by Not the Goblin, who's not a goblin and was a feral goblin character that all the Gobbo players out there absolutely loved. Then we had Fresh Cut Grass, who is a potentially homicidal little robot. Yeah, Sam Riegel is exactly the kind of player who plays the little guys. And in addition to this, there's also a lot of great examples of characters who are not little guys, but are classified as little guys. Asterion from Baldur's Gate 3 would be a little guy.
No, I won't kill them. Well, maybe Shadowheart. Let me go! Hello.
Sure, a lot of people love him because he's charismatic, suave, kind of got that strong vampire energy going on. But what I think people really like about Asterion more than anything is how cartoonishly evil and callous his character is, saying oftentimes some of the most fucked up things in the game and just being okay with doing the rudest stuff possible. So you can see here that a little guy character is either a goofy character, oftentimes having some layers deep down of seriousness, or a medium-sized character who just is bigger than life. They do things that other characters wouldn't really do, or other people wouldn't think would be rational to do in a situation. They have some weird quirks, and they are just overall lovable for that. Though, of course, like anything out there There are people who are just repulsed by the idea of the little guy. I'm not one of those people in particular, but I know many in the TTRPG space are. And if you've watched any of the, or if you read any of the comments from Critical Role, you know how many people absolutely hate Sam Riegel's characters. So, the little guy is classified as just a quirky character who really shouldn't be left to their own devices. It is classic. So much media, so many different types of games or movies or TV shows have these characters that honestly, if the story was all about them, the story would tank. But because they exist in a group typically, then they get to cut the tension in the weirdest ways, distract from the serious moments, or hurt the party badly by having something terrible happen to them, and then everyone cries. But how do you make a little guy character? How do you make your little Gobbo? How do you make your little Leshy and make them actually good and interesting? And on top of this, not annoying. Because the trick to the little guy character and the reason why playing a true little guy is more or less a advanced player thing is it's difficult to make a character who is kind of weird, kind of quirky, who doesn't break immersion, doesn't become annoying as time goes by. Hello, Jar Jar Binks. But most importantly, can break the icy hearts of the other party members until they're eventually accepted in as a full-on group member that anyone would die for. Now, I've been GMing for a really long time, and one of the things I've grown really good at is helping players realize the type of characters they have by giving them some advice on how they can play their character or things they can do to make their character just a little bit better. As a lot of people get a really good vision for a character, but have a hard time realizing that in the actual game. Because it's all fun and games in your head when you can imagine what your character would say because you have enough time to think about doing so. But in the moment, it's really hard to play that quirky character. And some people kind of take it to an extreme. I've played in lots of general public, like Adventures League style things, and there's a lot of people who think they're being the little guy, but they're really just being a big annoyance for the group, and no one really likes playing with them. And that's not something I want for all of you. So let me give you guys some advice on how to play the little guy. Let's start off with a simple ratio. The little guy is 70% comedy and 30% serious. Nothing else. You need this ratio, but it's not at all times. You're not 70% funny and a little bit serious with everything you say. How you play your character most of the time is mostly going to be comedy. That's at 70%. But the few glimpses into what your character has actually gone through, the looks of into their past or the various parts of them that are really just sad little guys on the inside, that's the 30% that you sprinkle in through your campaign until eventually you get your big moment, and that's where the majority of your 30% really comes in, when you just have a heartbreaking moment and everyone cries and suddenly your character is remembered in the annals of your party's memory banks for the rest of time. So most of the time, play the comedy character. Now, this doesn't mean necessarily being silly, goofy, or a town jester or anything like that. The little guy always has a quirk of some kind. Asterion from Baldur's Gate 3, for instance, is just kind of comically evil, but he's willing to go with the party really no matter what they say. And honestly, in the times that you catch him out, he's really bad at lying.
You're here? Thank goodness. I was worried about you. You looked a little ill last night, but you've certainly recovered. Ugh, God damn it! I understand you're upset, but let's not get carried away. Killed feels like a strong word. Not many corpses have your vigor. Now, I admit I got carried away last night. I apologize. But look at you now, perfectly healthy. So let's not fall out over this. We still need each other, after all.
Now, someone who is not really good at playing these little guy kind of characters, they would make him a good liar, or they would really starchly defend anything he's doing. But when you catch Asterion out, he kind of just comes out into the open. He's just like, okay, fine, you found me. So what? I'm an asshole. And that's the best part about it, is you don't have to fight Asterion to get to know him necessarily. Now, of course, you do have to go through his storyline, and he doesn't really open up until the 3rd chapter, but you don't need to fight him when it comes to finding his little quirky bits or like the things that really humanize him. He's not always necessarily so cartoonishly evil. He has moments where he does break down. He does say, okay, maybe it's not so bad, but maybe he'll make a snarky comment afterwards being like, we should have just left the children to die or something like that. So you need to have a really solid grasp of when comedy is appropriate and when it's important to really let your character be broken down by everyone else. In fact, when you look at media, the little guy characters are oftentimes the punching bag for the group. They're the ones who are more or less kicking their shit in whenever they do something dumb or poorly. Don't fight your party members. Let them give you your comeuppance. In fact, one of the best ways to play the little guy is setting yourself up with a house of cards so that the group can knock them down. This is how you make your character really fun and interactive. No matter what you're doing, you can be easily disarmed by the party members. This creates a kind of synergy between you and maybe a more serious party member, because then they become your character's caretaker. And that creates a bond that you can use for the rest of the game to have all kinds of fun moments. But not only that, allow the two characters to get closer to each other. This is a really excellent way to really establish your position in the party and what your character is really about. And the best part about all this, you don't have to do anything super special to keep this little guy persona. You can be as effective or ineffective in combat as you want. You could be a barbarian hitting hard using a super meta build, and then just kind of get reined in by the party members when you do so. In fact, going back to Critical Role, another little guy character in the group is Grog the Barbarian from the 1st season. He's the perfect big little guy. He has all kinds of really funny, really silly moments. His character is incredibly dim-witted, but the other party members are allowed to kind of get one on up over on him all the time. And he often just laughs it off, or he tries to get even later, but he doesn't get necessarily mad about it. When Vax shaved his beard off, for instance, he didn't just bash Vax into the ground evoking PvP because, something he didn't want to happen to his character happened. No, he strategized and he got back at Vax later. This is another really great quality, and it created an interesting party dynamic. And Grog did have a lot of interesting party dynamics with some of the other party members. Some stronger than others. Pike was overall his caretaker, but Vax was kind of like his rival. Vax being a much more serious, much more intense character, but Grog allowing him to have his own silly moments to counteract that. While Percy, on the other hand, they did have their moment together where they did kind of clash, but Percy, being smarter, did get one up over on Grog, and Grog left defeated, even though he could have just beaten Percy to a pulp. That's the thing. When you're the little guy, you're always the fall guy for whatever situation that is. This is how you create your moments with the rest of the party. So I guess I didn't really state, but the next part you really should focus on is creating party dynamics by being the fall guy. Best way to sum it up, all you have to do is make sure you are creating problems that are easily diffused so that your party can clean up after you and you guys can make on your merry way. Do this whenever there's a dull moment in the campaign, not a serious moment, not a quiet moment, a dull moment. Whenever you guys are on the road, whenever you guys are going through town, doing a shopping episode or something like that, cause a little chaos, do a little something quirky, and the other players will have to clean up after you, but you spiced up the moment rather than just having it being another boring moment. Your character is incredibly versatile in these role-playing moments, and they're incredibly fun for the party as long as you're doing it in a measured fashion, and as well, as long as you're doing it in a way that is creating fun for everyone else. This actually brings me to another point I really want to emphasize, because this is the number one thing. If you learn anything else from this video, this is the number one thing people do wrong. But before we talk about that, hey, would you guys like to like the video and subscribe to the channel? I am trying to make interesting tabletop content. I feel like tabletop is really getting to a new era soon. We have Foundry's VTT coming out with a full-on video game TTRPG module that you can essentially play with Ember. If you're interested, go check it out. Not that I'm sponsored anything, but I think it's really cool. We have all kinds of big games coming out on the horizon. And with D&D 2024 kind of just not doing a whole bunch, kind of just being a optional rule set more than an actual expansion to D&D 5e, the market is starting to open up because people want more, honestly. And I don't blame them. So liking this video will help other people see the great tabletop content that I have to make. But if you like other people's tabletop content as well, you're watching a video for any more than 5 minutes, leave a like. The more likes we get in tabletop in general, the more other people will get to see our content, which is something that I really want. And if you like my content specifically, subscribe. I cover all kinds of things. I cover games early, and I have fun videos like this. So if that's anything you're interested in, subscribe. All right. What's the number one thing that people get wrong when it comes to the little guys? Controlled chaos. This is the number one thing that people mess up on because this is impulsive. This is the thing where people have these very impulsive thoughts, the intrusive thoughts. The little guy is so prone to having intrusive thoughts that just make them do the wildest of things that get the party in trouble. And this can be annoying to deal with. Now, I was just talking about how this can spice a moment up that's particularly dull in the game, but depending on how you do it, depending on the level of control that comes with the chaos, you start having issues where you're creating bigger problems that are less fun to clean up. You need to have a good balance of something that is fun to clean up and is not overly intrusive into the story or everyone's game time. You want to do something simple. Don't steal from the shopkeep. That's really annoying, and the GM hates that kind of stuff and is going to have to send ultra powerful guards to squash your ultra powerful party, which breaks immersion, and it's just a really bad thing to do. In fact, thievery is mostly the incorrect choice, unless the thing you're stealing isn't of any value. It is something silly, a fez hat from a market stall, an orange, maybe, if you're hungry or something like that, but that can be also annoying. You want something that's silly. You want something that your character wants that no reasonable character would want. You can also steal things that people don't mind you stealing. Sure, it's a little silly, but if your character is walking around with a mostly dried cow pie because you thought it was interesting, they're gonna be like, ugh, but as long as you're not making it overly gross, no one's gonna care that you picked that off the street, and it makes your character a little quirky. I'm not saying to go down that route necessarily. I'm saying if that's what your character does, if you just want unbridled chaos, then make it something that no one is going to miss and make it something a fascination for your character. There's all kinds of great ways you can control the chaos so that you mix things up a little bit, but you don't tip the boat, as to say. There's a lot of situations where a little bit of chaos is really bad. When your group is seeing the king of a nation, that would be a bad time to cause chaos. But if you're in the sitting room waiting to go see the king, sketching some kind of dick or something on a chair is the greatest way to add a little spice, and it's something that the GM's not going to be necessarily overly concerned about. And any time you can make a GM be like, oh, or have some kind of reaction to what you're doing that isn't inherently negative are also great things, but keep your scope small. Don't let the intrusive thoughts that are really messy get into your character too much. Make sure everything you're doing is easy and quick to diffuse. This allows the game to progress at a regular pace without overly having to stop so that the other characters can nanny your character and making your character an overall burden for the rest of the party. One last bit I'm going to leave you all off with here today is don't make your character's serious aspects overly serious, overly complicated, or anything like that. Not that that can't work. What I'm more getting at is there's a lot of times where you try to create the facade that actually your little guy was like a genius the whole time or was severely hurting on the inside. And so all these kind of quirky actions are really just cries for help. It's good to have a pity story, but it doesn't always have to be a pity story. In fact, having a little guy character who just is truly and honestly an aspiring adventurer who wants to be a hero one day is endearing and is something that really can get the party on your side. But if you make things overly complicated, if you make your whole persona of your little guy fake or false, you're going to have a moment that really disrupts everyone's perception of your character. And then they have to rebuild the image of your character in their mind. And while that can be good, you are betraying the initial character concept and idea that you may have initially came out with. You want the little guy to be as much a part of your character's true personality as everything else. Just don't necessarily take everything away. One of the things, talking about Critical Role again, that I felt was really kind of disruptive was when Knots became Beth, and kind of Sam Riegel had a hard time changing the personality to make her a little bit more serious, not nearly as goblin-like, and it makes the whole goblin persona feel like it was fake the whole time, or that the act of transforming actively changed her character. There's some messy parts with that, and Veth at the end versus not towards the beginning, I feel is not as interesting as a character. And sure, maybe diehard fans can get more appreciation out of this, but what I can honestly say is you had to rebuild your image of Veth after not transformed back into Veth from the ground up, which is a little hard, and it can sometimes make you feel like the character is incomplete by the end of the story because you're still trying to gather why they did what they did or whatever. Your story doesn't have to be all that deep. It just has to be meaningful to your character. That's the big part. Make whatever happened, whatever makes your character such the chaos monkey that they are, meaningful. So much media, so many anime do something like this, where a character who's perceived as being very childish or being very immature is that way because maybe it made their mom happy before their mom died, or before their mom got sick and went into a coma. Maybe they didn't get attention until they started acting that way. And now that's just a part of who they are. It adds the layers of depth that can kind of justify some of the chaos, and all that is more justifiable if you've done all the prior steps correctly. So make sure whenever you're playing your little guy, whatever quirks you give them, whatever interesting things you decide to take, you are playing a actual RPG character. You can have fun, you can have chaos, you can be a little gobbo all you want throughout your adventure. But you can also be an incredibly serious, interesting, and in-depth character at the same time. It's incredibly difficult to do, and most people do not do this correctly. So, if you do it correctly, then you can play this kind of character as much as you want. And I know many people who do play these kind of characters love playing them time and time again. So get better at the craft, get better at what you're doing. You'll have more fun, you'll have more connections in the game, and your characters will be more memorable. That's what's important in tabletop. It's the fun and the story we tell along the way. But that's going to be it for me. Thank you all so much for watching. Hopefully y'all enjoyed. I want to do a few more videos like this. I also am going to go back to doing some more builds, so be on the lookout for that. But that's going to be it for me. Good luck with your games. Leave the bad luck to me, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye.